On October 31st, 2025, the Trump administration dropped a diplomatic bombshell. In a move that shocked the foreign policy establishment, the White House redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern, explicitly citing severe religious persecution and using a phrase that has terrified diplomats for decades: Christian genocide. For many looking in from the outside, this looks like a religious war: Muslim against Christian, jihad against the church. But if you ask a historian, they won't point to 2025. They won't even point to the rise of Boko Haram in 2009. They will point to a map from 1914. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Headlines, a podcast born from the motivation to help Nigerians and even those who are not Nigerians understand the core issues beyond the headlines. The headlines hardly tell the context behind the story. They give you the what, but rarely the why or the how we got here. On this maiden edition, we will be exploring the deep historical roots of Nigeria's security crisis, the multiple dimensions of violence across different regions, and why what looks like a simple religious conflict is actually far more complex than most media coverage suggests. To understand why a church burning in Plateau State matters in Washington, D.C. today, you have to understand the amalgamation of 1914. This was the moment the British colonial administration, led by Lord Lugard, fused two distinct nations into one. It wasn't done for unity, it was a marriage of convenience. The North was predominantly Muslim, with centralized, centuries-old caliphates and a deficit in the colonial budget. The South was a mix of Christians and traditionalists, wealthier from coastal trade, but politically fractured. The British joined them not to build a nation, but to balance a spreadsheet. They forced over 250 ethnic groups to cohabit under one roof, yet kept them administratively separate, planting the seeds of us versus them that we see today. Fast forward to the 1980s. Most people think religious terrorism in Nigeria started with Boko Haram. They're wrong. 30 years before Boko Haram, there was maiden. Led by a radical preacher named Muhammad Marwa, this group rejected the Nigerian state, rejected Western consumerism, and rejected Orthodox Islam. In 1980, their uprising in Kano left over 4,000 people dead. Why does this matter? Because the Nigerian state crushed maiden with military force, but never fixed the poverty and lack of education that fueled it. The ideology didn't die, it just went dormant, waiting for a new name. The final crack in the foundation happened at the turn of the millennium. Just as Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999, a political earthquake hit. 12 northern states, led by Zamfara, implemented Sharia penal codes. For the Muslim majority in the north, this was a reclamation of identity. But for the millions of Christians living in those states, and for the south, it felt like a violation of the secular constitution. It created a psychological partition. It validated the idea that Nigeria operates under two separate sets of laws. By the time we get to the 2020s, the fuel was already everywhere. The poverty, the history, the religious divide. All it needed was a spark. If you want to survive in Nigeria's conflict zones, you need to know exactly where you are standing, because the violence in the northeast is not the same as the violence in the northwest. We are dealing with a hydra, a monster with three distinct heads. The first head is in the northeast. This is the home of Boko Haram and ISWAP, Islamic State, West Africa Province. Here, the war is ideological. Boko Haram, or JAS, is the chaotic faction. They attack everyone: Christians, Muslims who don't agree with them, aid workers. They are known for mass abductions and using women as suicide bombers. But ISWAP is different, and frankly, more dangerous. They split from Boko Haram because they wanted to focus on winning hearts and minds. They tax civilians, they provide crude justice, and they target the military and Christians specifically to stoke religious tension. They don't just want to destroy the state, they want to replace it. Move to the northwest, and the story changes. For years, we called them bandits. These aren't religious zealots, they are warlords. Figures like Bello Turji became TikTok famous for flaunting their wealth. They are kidnapping entrepreneurs. But in late 2024 and 2025, a new group emerged here, Lakurawa. Migrating from the Sahel, Mali and Niger, they are imposing a strict version of Sharia in Kebbi and Sokoto. They are driving out the bandits, acting as super cops to win local support, only to impose their own brutal rule. It's a mutation of the conflict we didn't see coming. Finally, the Middle Belt. This is the collision point. Here, the headlines scream religious war, but the ground reality screams climate change. As the Sahara Desert moves south, swallowing pasture in the north, Fulani herders are forced to move their cattle down into the lush farmlands of the Middle Belt. These lands are owned mostly by Christian farmers. Cows eat crops, farmers retaliate, herders return with military-grade weapons. It is a fight for water and grass, but because the herders are Muslim and the farmers are Christian, every cow that tramples a farm looks like an act of jihad, and every reprisal looks like a crusade. 3 regions, 3 different causes. But in 2025, these lines are blurring. The bandits are working with the terrorists. The herders are buying guns from the insurgents. In any war, follow the money. By late 2025, kidnapping in Nigeria isn't just a crime. It is one of the most lucrative sectors of the economy. According to SBM Intelligence, in the last cycle alone, Nigerians paid over 2.5 billion naira in cash ransoms. And that's just what was reported. We are seeing what experts call the democratization of violence. You don't need to be a top-tier terrorist anymore. You just need an AK-47 and a group of friends. We've seen cases where neighbors kidnap neighbors. We've seen kidnapping franchises where victims are sold from one gang to another. This brings us to the scariest term in intelligence circles: threat convergence. Remember the bandits and the terrorists? They are starting to talk to each other. The terrorists in the northeast need money. The bandits in the northwest have money from ransoms, but need better weapons. A trade route has opened up. This means the religious war and the criminal war are merging. When a bus is stopped in Kaduna, the passengers don't know if they are being taken for their faith or their bank accounts. Often, it's both. So, back to the news. Why did the Trump administration drop the Christian genocide designation now? It's leverage. The US sees Nigeria teetering. If Nigeria falls, the entire West African region collapses, sending millions of refugees toward Europe and the West. But this designation is a double-edged sword. For Nigerian Christians, it is validation, a sign that the world finally sees their suffering. But for the Nigerian government, it cuts off access to crucial military aid and weapons they need to fight these very terrorists. It's a diplomatic catch-22. Behind the maps, the politics, and the billions of naira are the people. The farmer in Benue who is too scared to plant his crops, driving food prices up by 200%. The student in Zamfara who hasn't been to school in 2 years because of fear of abduction. The pastor in Plateau who preaches forgiveness while standing in the ashes of his sanctuary. The crisis in Nigeria is deep, historical, and complex. It is not simply just about religion, and it is not also just about crime. It is about the struggle to build a nation out of a colonial empire. Thanks for listening to the show. If you found this helpful, share it. This has been Beyond the Headlines. I am Dan Mill. I'll see you in the next episode.